Joining us now is geopolitical analyst and trilogy advisors John Sitilides. Hey, John, thanks so much for joining us. How do you see this, especially taking into account just how furious the Chinese seem to be? It's almost like they see this as just the United States throwing more mud in their eye. How about you?
Well, let's put some proper context to all of this, Rick, and thanks again for having me on your program.
Of course.
It was in January of 2019 that Chinese Communist Party General Chairman Xi Jinping declared publicly that Taiwan is going to be reunified sometime in the next 30 years with China, ideally peacefully, but if not by military force. So that was really, I think, a very stark warning to Taiwan and any of its partners and allies in Asia, and of course in Washington, that China was deadly serious about this great rejuvenation policy under Chairman Xi, and that Taiwan's independence is threatened. Going back to the China policy that you mentioned, dating back to the 1970s, remember that the U.S. does not recognize Taiwan as an independent sovereign nation state. It does recognize it as an autonomous region within China, and the differences between Taipei and Beijing are to be worked out between those two capitals. But in the meantime, Taiwan conducts independent trade with the U.S. and with countries around the world, including in Asia, including with China, as well as U.S. arms sales and those of other countries to Taiwan. So there's a very interesting, what we call strategic ambiguity to Washington's relations with Taiwan, where we don't consider it an ally on the order of NATO or Japan or South Korea, but the U.S. is committed to the defense and to the support of Taiwan in the event of a Chinese military operation against the island.
Yeah, but you get my point. There's people watching this newscast who wonder sometimes, as much as we love our country, I love my sons, but when they go into the neighbor's house and make mischief and the neighbor complains to me, I'm going to tell my son that he has no right to be going into their yard because it doesn't belong to us. We as Americans love our country, but I see time and time again where we're interfering in Taiwan in a catfight with the Chinese. We're trying to interfere with Russia in a catfight, or interfere in Ukraine in a catfight with the Russians. We just go around the world asserting ourselves in the neighbors of other countries who we declare our enemies. And I just wonder in the end whether that's going to be good practice and good policy, or if that's going to catch up to us at some point. I worry for my grandchildren especially.
Well, we should all care about our children and our grandchildren, Rick, but on the world stage, it's very important that the U.S. demonstrate the resolve to provide for freedom of navigation operations, for open and free shipping that benefits not only China and Taiwan and South Korea and Japan, but countries around the world. And it's very important that China itself really rethink its policy towards Taiwan, especially in light of the destruction of democracy in Hong Kong, which was supposed to be the example for China's policy towards Taiwan of one country and two systems. And they smothered that doctrine in Hong Kong of last year. And they've really lost almost all credibility with those parties in Taiwan that China may have been hoping to negotiate some type of a peaceful reunification with. And the fact that China is constantly conducting exercises for massive amphibious invasions of Taiwan and many of its smaller islands sends all of the wrong signals to the people of Taiwan, to its 23 million citizens, that they have a viable, prosperous, democratic future in China. So I think much of the burden right now falls on Beijing to demonstrate that it's a good neighbor, it can be a good partner. And under current leadership, under Chairman Xi Jinping, they have failed miserably at that, both in Taiwan and with many of China's Asian neighbors.
John Sitilides, you represent your point very well, and my thanks as usual for coming on. Appreciate it, John. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.